My name is Pearl Thompson, and I'm 58 years old. 2 months ago, I lost my only son, Brandon, in a car accident. We lived together for 5 years after my husband passed away. My daughter in law, Cassandra, and I were never close, but I never expected what happened next. The day after the funeral, she threw me out of the house with nothing but a suitcase. I thought my life was over until that day at the lawyer's office when everything changed. Before I dive into the most devastating and shocking day of my life, let me know where you're watching from and tap that subscribe button if you've ever faced betrayal from someone you thought was family. I grew up in a middle-class family in Minnesota with loving parents who taught me the value of hard work and kindness. I met my husband, Richard, during my sophomore year of college. He was studying accounting and I was pursuing my education degree. We instantly connected over our shared values and dreams of building a family together. After graduation, we married and settled in a modest home in the suburbs. Richard and I tried for years to have children. After multiple miscarriages and failed fertility treatments, we had almost given up hope when I finally became pregnant with Brandon. He was our miracle baby born after 10 years of marriage. The day he was born was the happiest day of our lives. I can still remember Richard's tears as he held our son for the first time, promising to give him everything we never had. Brandon grew up to be a bright, kind-hearted boy. He excelled academically and had a natural talent for making friends. He was always bringing home strays, whether they were animals or classmates who needed a place to feel welcomed. Richard and I encouraged his compassionate nature, proud of the young man he was becoming. While Brandon was growing up, I worked as a kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school. Richard's accounting firm provided a stable income, and together we managed to provide Brandon with a comfortable life. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we never lacked for anything important. Our lives changed dramatically when Richard suffered a massive heart attack 5 years ago. It happened on a regular Tuesday evening. We had just finished dinner when Richard complained about pain in his arm. Within minutes, he collapsed. The paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. Just like that, after 30 years of marriage, I was a widow. The grief was overwhelming, but I had to keep going. Brandon had graduated college by then and was starting to build his real estate development business. He was my rock during that terrible time. What I didn't know was that Richard had been struggling financially before his death. He had made some poor investment decisions and our retirement savings had been severely depleted. To make matters worse, his life insurance policy had lapsed just months before his death. I found myself facing mounting debts and a mortgage I couldn't afford on my teacher's pension. After months of struggling, I made the heartbreaking decision to sell our family home. Brandon, seeing my distress, immediately offered a solution. "Mom, you don't need to worry about finding a new place," he told me. "Cassandra and I have that big house with plenty of room. You should come live with us." I was hesitant at first. Brandon had been married to Cassandra for 3 years at that point. They seemed happy, but I knew from Brandon's occasional comments that Cassandra valued her privacy. Still, Brandon insisted, and eventually I accepted his offer. Cassandra greeted the news with a tight smile. "Of course, Brandon's mother is always welcome," she said. Though her tone suggested otherwise, I promised myself I would try my best to be helpful and unobtrusive. Brandon and Cassandra's home was a beautiful 2-story house in an upscale neighborhood reflecting Brandon's growing success in real estate. They had 2 children, Amy, who was just a year old when I moved in, and Tyler, who was born 2 years later. I cherished being so close to my grandchildren, watching them grow and helping care for them. In the beginning, Cassandra was polite but distant. She worked as a marketing executive for a luxury retail brand and seemed perpetually busy. When she was home, she spent most of her time on her phone or laptop. Brandon was often working late, expanding his business. I tried to make myself useful by cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the children when needed. Over time, I noticed Cassandra becoming increasingly irritated by my presence. When I would suggest activities for the children or prepare family meals, she would often override my decisions or criticize my methods. "That's not how we do things in this house," became her common refrain. I tried to adapt to follow her lead, but it never seemed to be enough. I sometimes overheard arguments between Brandon and Cassandra about me. One night through the thin walls, I heard Cassandra say, "It was supposed to be temporary, Brandon. It's been 2 years now. When is she going to get her own place?" Brandon's voice was firm but tired. "This is her home now, Cass. She's family. She helps with the kids and she has nowhere else to go." "It's always about your mother." What about what I want? This is my house too. These conversations broke my heart, but I couldn't afford to move out. My pension barely covered my personal expenses and medical bills. I tried to stay out of Cassandra's way as much as possible, but tension continued to build in the household. Despite these undercurrents, Brandon and Cassandra's marriage appeared stable to outsiders. They hosted dinner parties for Brandon's clients and Cassandra's colleagues. They took family vacations to expensive resorts. They seemed to have the perfect life, at least on the surface, but I saw the cracks. Brandon worked increasingly long hours, often coming home after the children were asleep. Cassandra spent money lavishly on designer clothes, spa days, and home renovations. She was constantly trying to impress her wealthy friends, always concerned about appearances. I found my greatest joy in my grandchildren. Amy, now 6, was thoughtful and artistic like her father. Tyler, 4, was energetic and curious about everything. I cherished our time together reading stories, baking cookies, and going to the park. These moments made all the tension with Cassandra worthwhile. I made countless attempts to bond with Cassandra, hoping to bridge the gap between us. I offered to help with her charity events, complimented her decorating choices, and always expressed gratitude for being welcomed into their home. But my efforts were consistently met with polite dismissal or outright rejection. It seemed nothing I could do would ever make her see me as anything but an unwanted burden. Little did I know that our uneasy coexistence was about to be shattered in ways I could never have imagined. As the months passed, Cassandra's resentment toward me became increasingly difficult to ignore. What had started as subtle signs of displeasure evolved into open hostility. She would make plans for family outings and forget to include me. Dinner would be prepared for 4, not 5, and when I mentioned it, she would claim it was an oversight. "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to join us," she would say with a smile that never reached her eyes. I started spending more time in my room or with my grandchildren, trying to minimize interactions that might trigger Cassandra's irritation. The children became my refuge. Amy would often knock on my door after school, eager to show me her artwork or read me stories she had written. Tyler loved when I built elaborate block towers with him or pretended to be dinosaurs roaming the backyard. These moments were precious, a reminder of why I endured the tension. Meanwhile, Brandon was working longer hours than ever. His real estate development company was handling multiple projects simultaneously, and the stress was evident in his appearance. He had lost weight, dark circles permanently shadowed his eyes, and he seemed perpetually distracted even when he was physically present. Cassandra's spending habits became more extravagant as Brandon's business flourished. She redecorated the living room twice in 1 year, each time with more expensive furniture. Her closet overflowed with designer clothes, many still bearing tags. She joined an exclusive country club and spent most weekends there with her new friends, wives of successful businessmen and local celebrities. One evening, while helping Amy with homework at the kitchen table, I overheard Cassandra on the phone in the adjacent room. "I know it's so frustrating," she was saying in a hushed tone. "She's always here watching everything I do. I feel like I can't breathe in my own home." There was a pause before she continued. "Brandon refuses to discuss it. He says she has nowhere else to go. As if that's my problem." Another pause. "Well, something has to change. I didn't sign up for this when I married him." Her words stung, but they weren't surprising. I had long suspected that Cassandra viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenience, a burden she was forced to bear because of Brandon's sense of duty. I began to notice other troubling signs around this time. Brandon received frequent text messages that caused him to step away from family gatherings. He had hushed phone conversations in his home office, ending calls abruptly if someone entered the room. At first, I assumed it was work-related stress, but there was something in his demeanor that suggested more. One night after the children were asleep, I knocked on his office door. He was hunched over his desk, reviewing documents, looking exhausted. "Brandon, honey, is everything okay?" I asked. "You've seemed so stressed lately." He looked up, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just busy with work." "Are you sure? You know you can talk to me about anything." He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he might confide in me. Then his phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it, and his expression closed off. "I'm sure. It's just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." I didn't push further, but my concern grew. Something was wrong beyond the usual work pressure, and Brandon wasn't sharing it with me. I wondered if he was having problems with Cassandra, if their marriage was in trouble. but whenever they were together in public, they maintained the appearance of the perfect couple. The last truly happy day we had as a family was for Tyler's 4th birthday. Brandon took the day off work, and we had a superhero-themed party in the backyard. Brandon bounced on the trampoline with the kids, his laughter genuine for the first time in months. Cassandra seemed relaxed, taking photos and chatting amicably with the other parents. For a few hours, it felt like we were a normal, happy family. As I helped clean up after the party, Brandon came into the kitchen with a stack of paper plates. "Thanks for all your help today, Mom. The kids had a blast." "I'm always happy to help," I said. "It was wonderful to see you relaxing and having fun." He nodded, his smile fading slightly. "I needed this. Things have been complicated lately." Again, I sensed he wanted to say more, but Cassandra walked in at that moment, and the opportunity passed. Looking back, I wish I had found another moment to talk with him to really understand what was happening, but I never got the chance. 3 days later, everything changed forever. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I was reading bedtime stories to Amy and Tyler when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Brandon, and I answered cheerfully, expecting him to say he was on his way home from work. Instead, a woman's voice spoke. "Is this Pearl Thompson?" "Yes," I replied, immediately sensing something was wrong. "This is Nurse Rivera from Mercy General Hospital. Your son Brandon Thompson has been in a car accident. You need to come right away." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I somehow managed to ask, is he okay?" Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Please, just come quickly." I called Cassandra, who was at a dinner with clients, and told her to meet me at the hospital. Then I called our neighbor Susan to come watch the children. The 30-minute drive to the hospital was the longest of my life, my hands shaking on the steering wheel as I navigated through the rain, praying desperately for Brandon to be okay. When I arrived at the emergency room, a doctor was waiting for me. His solemn expression sent ice through my veins before he even spoke. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Levine. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your son sustained massive internal injuries in the accident. We did everything we could, but he didn't make it." I collapsed, right there in the waiting room. A nurse helped me to a chair as I sobbed uncontrollably, my entire world shattering around me. My beautiful boy, my only child, was gone. It didn't seem possible. I had just spoken to him that morning, heard his laugh, made plans for the weekend. Cassandra arrived 20 minutes later. When the doctor repeated the devastating news, she stood perfectly still, her face a mask of shock. No tears, no collapse, just a strange, detached calm that didn't register with me at the time. She asked practical questions about what happened and what needed to be done next. Later, I would remember her composed reaction and wonder, but in that moment I was lost in my own grief. The days that followed passed in a blur of unbearable pain. I could barely eat or sleep. The simplest tasks felt impossible. I would find myself staring at the wall, lost in memories of Brandon as a child, as a teenager, as the wonderful man and father he had become. The thought that I would never see his smile again, never hear his voice, was too much to bear. Cassandra took charge of the funeral arrangements with an efficiency that now seemed suspicious. She made decisions about everything from the casket to the flowers without consulting me. When I tried to suggest that Brandon would have preferred a more modest personal service, she dismissed my input. "I was his wife," she said firmly. "I know what he would have wanted." Each dismissal felt like another small wound on top of my overwhelming grief. This was my son, my only child, and I was being pushed aside during the planning of his final farewell. But I was too devastated to fight, too broken to assert myself. The funeral was held at an expensive funeral home Cassandra selected. Hundreds of people attended, many I had never met, business associates and social connections more than true friends. I sat in the front row, clutching tissues, my body physically aching from grief. Cassandra sat beside me, elegant in a designer black dress, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes. Brandon's closest friend, Michael, delivered a beautiful eulogy that captured the essence of my son, his generosity, his humor, his dedication to family. Several business associates spoke about his integrity and vision. Each story revealed facets of Brandon's life that I hadn't known, parts of himself he had shared with others, but not with me. It was a bittersweet realization that even as his mother, there were sides to him I hadn't fully seen. During the reception after the service, I noticed Cassandra in deep conversation with a tall, well-dressed man I didn't recognize. They stood closer than seemed appropriate, and at one point he placed his hand on her arm in a gesture that appeared intimate. When she saw me watching, she immediately stepped away from him and returned to accepting condolences from other guests. As people began to leave, Cassandra approached me, her expression suddenly cold in a way I had never seen before. "We need to talk when we get home," she said, her voice low and controlled, "about arrangements moving forward." Something in her tone sent a chill through me, but surrounded by mourners offering condolences, I couldn't ask what she meant. I assumed she wanted to discuss how we would manage household responsibilities now that Brandon was gone. I had no idea what was really coming. That evening, after putting the exhausted, confused children to bed, I came downstairs to find Cassandra waiting in the living room, sitting rigidly on the edge of the sofa. The house felt unnaturally quiet, the absence of Brandon's presence like a physical weight in the air. "Pearl," she said without preamble, "I think it's best if you find somewhere else to live." I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What?" This arrangement was Brandon's idea, not mine. Now that he's gone, things need to change. I want you out of the house within 24 hours. The cruelty of her timing, the calculated coldness of delivering this blow on the very day we had buried my son was breathtaking. In that moment, I realized that the polite facade Cassandra had maintained all these years had completely fallen away, revealing the true nature beneath. I stood frozen in the living room, unable to process what I had just heard. The funeral flowers were still on the entry table. The sympathy cards lined the mantel. My son had been laid to rest just hours ago, and now his wife was telling me I had to leave the home where I had lived for 5 years. "Cassandra," I said, my voice trembling, "this is Brandon's house too. You can't just throw me out." Her laugh was cold, devoid of any warmth or compassion. "Actually, I can. The house is in my name as well as Brandon's, and now that he's gone, I get to decide who lives here." "But the children," I pleaded, thinking of Amy and Tyler sleeping upstairs. "They just lost their father. They need stability right now. They need their grandmother." "My children will be fine," she said dismissively. "I've already arranged for a full-time nanny starting next week. Your services won't be necessary." My services? As if my role in my grandchildren's lives was nothing more than that of an employee, as if the love and care I had given them was something that could be replaced with hired help. "Please," I begged, tears filling my eyes again. "I have nowhere to go. I sold my house to help Brandon with the down payment on this one. Everything I have is here." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it quickly hardened into resolve. "That's not my problem, Pearl. I've allowed this situation for years because Brandon insisted, but this is my house now, and I want my space back." "Can we at least discuss this?" I asked. "Give me some time to find a place, save up a deposit. 24 hours, she repeated firmly, "or I'll call the police and have you removed as a trespasser." The threat struck me like a physical blow. "You wouldn't try me?" Her eyes were cold, calculating. "I've already consulted a lawyer. You have no legal right to be here." I realized then that this was not a sudden decision. She had been planning this perhaps for a long time, waiting for the opportunity to remove me from her life. And now, in my most vulnerable moment, she was executing that plan. I spent that night alternating between sobbing and mechanically packing the few belongings that were truly mine. Most of my possessions from my previous life had been sold or given away when I moved in with Brandon and Cassandra. What remained fit into 2 suitcases and a few boxes. My entire life reduced to so little. The hardest part was early the next morning going into the children's rooms to say goodbye while they were still sleeping. I stood over Amy's bed, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face, the way her hair spread across the pillow. I gently kissed her forehead, trying not to wake her. "I love you, sweetheart," I whispered. "Grandma loves you so much." I did the same with Tyler, my heart breaking at the thought of not being there for his morning ritual of pancakes and superhero stories. These children were my world, my connection to Brandon. Being separated from them felt like losing my son all over again. I left before they woke up, unable to face explaining to them why Grandma was leaving. Cassandra had made it clear she would handle that conversation in her own way. I had no doubt she would craft a narrative that cast me in a negative light, perhaps telling the children I had chosen to leave. My friend Martha lived 20 minutes away, and had immediately offered her guest room when I called her in tears the night before. She helped me load my meager possessions into her car, her face tight with anger at Cassandra's cruelty. "This isn't right, Pearl," she said as we drove away from the house. "There must be something we can do legally." "I don't have the energy to fight right now," I admitted, watching the only home I had known for 5 years disappear in the side mirror. "I just lost my son. I can't lose what's left of myself in a legal battle I probably can't win." Martha's guest room was small but comfortable. She did everything she could to make me feel welcome, but nothing could ease the profound sense of loss and displacement I felt. In the span of a week, I had lost my son, my home, and access to my grandchildren. The weight of it all was almost unbearable. The following days were the darkest of my life. I barely got out of bed, consumed by grief and shock. Martha would bring me meals that I couldn't eat, sit with me as I cried, and assure me that eventually the pain would become manageable. I couldn't imagine how. I tried calling Cassandra several times to ask about retrieving the rest of my belongings and, more importantly, to speak to the children. My calls went straight to voicemail. After the fifth attempt, I received a text message. "Stop calling. I'll have your remaining items donated to Goodwill. Any further contact will be considered harassment." When Martha drove by the house a few days later, she reported that the locks had been changed and a security system sign had been placed in the front yard. It was clear Cassandra was serious about keeping me away. My physical health began to suffer along with my mental state. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and experienced frequent panic attacks. The grief counselor Martha encouraged me to see diagnosed me with acute stress disorder on top of my bereavement. She prescribed medication that dulled the edges of my pain but left me feeling foggy and disconnected. Friends rallied around me offering support meals and company. They were outraged on my behalf, some suggesting I should fight Cassandra legally. But without money for a lawyer and with no legal claim to the house, what could I do? Brandon and I had never formalized any agreement about my living situation. It had been a family arrangement, not a legal one. I started looking for affordable housing options, but on my limited pension, the prospects were grim. The cheapest apartments required security deposits I couldn't afford. Senior housing had long waiting lists. At 58, I was too young for many retirement communities, but struggling to imagine starting over in the workforce. Just when it seemed my situation couldn't get worse, I received an official-looking envelope in the mail addressed to me at Martha's house. Inside was a formal notification from a law firm. "Read the estate of Brandon James Thompson. Your presence is requested at the reading of the last will and testament." When the notification arrived about the will reading, my first instinct was to throw it away. The thought of seeing Cassandra again, of being in the same room with her after what she had done, made me physically ill. But Martha convinced me I needed to attend. "This could be important, Pearl," she insisted. "Brandon may have made provisions for you that Cassandra doesn't know about." "I doubt it," I said, the defeat evident in my voice. Brandon was only 35. People that young rarely think about wills and estates. "But he had children," Martha pointed out, "and a successful business. He would have wanted to protect those things." She was right, of course. Brandon had always been responsible. It would be unlike him not to have his affairs in order, especially with 2 young children depending on him. Still, the thought of the will reading filled me with dread. What if there was nothing for me? What if this was just another opportunity for Cassandra to humiliate me? The reading was scheduled for the following week at the offices of Harrington and Associates, a prestigious law firm downtown. I had never been there before, but the address was in the financial district where everything looked expensive and intimidating. "I have nothing appropriate to wear," I realized the night before, looking through the few clothes I had brought to Martha's. Most of my wardrobe had consisted of practical casual items suitable for caring for children and maintaining a household, nothing befitting a formal legal proceeding. Martha, who is about my size, offered to loan me a conservative navy blue dress and matching jacket. "You need to look confident," she said. "Don't give Cassandra the satisfaction of seeing you broken." That night I barely slept. Memories of Brandon flooded my mind, from his childhood to our last conversation just days before the accident. He had called to check if I could take the kids to their activities that weekend because he had some important business to take care of. What had that business been? Had he somehow sensed what was coming? I woke early, feeling exhausted but strangely resolute. Something about this day felt significant, though I couldn't explain why. I dressed carefully in Martha's clothes, applied minimal makeup to hide the worst effects of my grief, and tried to eat the breakfast Martha prepared, though each bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. "I'll drive you," Martha offered. "And wait outside if you want. No one should have to go through this alone." I accepted gratefully. The drive to the law office was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we approached the imposing glass building, my anxiety peaked. I almost asked Martha to turn around to take me back to the safety of her guest room, but somewhere deep inside, a small voice that sounded remarkably like Brandon's urged me forward. "Stand your ground, Mom," it seemed to say. "This matters." We arrived 30 minutes early, and I sat in the reception area, hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. The office was everything I expected: plush carpeting, expensive artwork, the hushed atmosphere of serious money and power. I felt distinctly out of place, a kindergarten teacher among financial titans. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and a familiar face appeared. Jack Peterson, Brandon's friend since college and his business partner in several real estate ventures, spotted me immediately and came over. "Pearl," he said warmly, taking my hands in his. "I'm so sorry about Brandon. He was the best man I knew." "Thank you, Jack," I replied, grateful for the genuine affection in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." Something flickered in his eyes, an expression I couldn't quite read. "I wouldn't miss it. Brandon was more than a partner to me. He was like a brother." Jack lowered his voice slightly. "How are you holding up? I heard about what happened with Cassandra." News travels fast in small circles, I thought. "I'm surviving," I answered honestly. "One day at a time." He squeezed my hands. "Brandon would be furious about how she's treated you." "It's not right." Before I could respond, the receptionist called my name. "Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Harrington is ready for you now. Conference room 3, down the hall to your left." Jack offered his arm. "Shall we—" His support gave me strength as we walked down the hallway. Just before we reached the conference room, he paused and looked at me intently. "Whatever happens in there, Pearl, remember that Brandon loved you more than anything. He always wanted to protect you." The cryptic nature of his comment confused me, but there was no time to ask what he meant. We had reached the conference room, and it was time to face whatever waited inside. The conference room was dominated by a large mahogany table around which several people were already seated. Cassandra was there, of course, looking immaculate in an expensive black suit, her hair and makeup flawlessly done despite her supposed grief. Beside her sat the man I had noticed at the funeral, now dressed in a tailored gray suit that matched Cassandra's in quality and style. His hand rested possessively on the back of her chair. Cassandra's eyes narrowed when she saw Jack accompanying me. A brief look of surprise, quickly masked, suggested she hadn't expected to see him there. Or perhaps she hadn't expected to see me with an ally. At the head of the table sat an older gentleman with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, whom I assumed was Mr. Harrington. He stood as we entered, extending his hand first to me. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Robert Harrington. I was your son's attorney for many years. Please accept my deepest condolences for your loss." "Thank you," I murmured, taking the offered seat across from Cassandra. Jack sat beside me, his presence reassuring. Mr. Harrington introduced the others in the room, his associate Ms. Chen, who would be taking notes, and Mr. Davis, the financial advisor who had helped Brandon manage his investments. Then he turned to Cassandra and the man beside her. "Mrs. Thompson," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "And Mr. James, I wasn't aware you would be joining us today." "Daniel is here for moral support," Cassandra replied smoothly. "Given the circumstances." Mr. Harrington's expression remained neutral, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "I see. Well, shall we proceed?" He opened a leather portfolio and removed a thick document. "We are here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Brandon James Thompson. Before I begin, I want to clarify that this is the most recent version of the will executed and notarized 3 months ago." 3 months ago, just before Brandon started showing signs of stress and distraction. The timing suddenly seemed significant. Mr. Harrington began reading the formal language of the will, much of which washed over me in legal terminology I barely understood. The initial sections dealt with standard matters: revocation of prior wills, appointment of executors, Mr. Harrington and Jack, interestingly not Cassandra, and definitions of terms used throughout the document. Then came the distributions. Brandon had made generous bequests to several charities, the Children's Hospital that had treated Amy for pneumonia when she was an infant, an organization providing housing for veterans, and his alma mater scholarship fund. He left specific items to friends, his vintage car collection to Jack, his first edition books to his college roommate, his golf clubs to his weekly golfing partner. As Mr. Harrington continued, Cassandra grew visibly impatient, tapping her manicured fingernails on the table. "Can we move on to the main estate?" she interrupted. "These minor bequests are hardly why we're all here." Mr. Harrington regarded her coolly over his glasses. "Mrs. Thompson, I am legally obligated to read the will in its entirety. Please allow me to continue." Finally, he reached what Cassandra had been waiting for. "As to the remainder of my estate, including all real property, financial accounts, business interests, and personal effects not otherwise specifically bequeathed, I leave to my wife, Cassandra Marie Thompson, provided that she has not engaged in conduct that would trigger the morality clause contained in Article 7 of this document." Cassandra smiled triumphantly, ignoring the qualification at the end of the statement. She turned to me, her expression malicious. "Well, Pearl, I hope you enjoy being homeless because I made sure you get nothing." The room fell silent. Even her companion looked uncomfortable with her open cruelty. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat pointedly. "Actually, there's one final section of the will that we need to address." Cassandra's smile faltered slightly. "What final section?" "That's it, right? I get everything." "Not quite," Mr. Harrington said, his voice taking on a firmer tone. He turned the page. Article 7. The morality clause I just mentioned reads as follows. In the event that my wife, Cassandra Marie Thompson, is engaged in an extramarital affair at the time of my death, or has engaged in such conduct within 1 year prior to my death, the provisions leaving the remainder of my estate to her shall be null and void. In such event, my estate shall instead be distributed as follows. The color drained from Cassandra's face. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "This is absurd. Brandon would never have included something like that." Mr. Harrington continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Evidence of such conduct shall be determined by my executors based on documentation I have provided to them in a sealed envelope to be opened only in the event of my death." He nodded to his associate, who produced a large envelope and handed it to him. Mr. Harrington opened it and removed several documents, including what appeared to be photographs and reports. 3 months ago, Mr. Harrington explained, looking directly at Cassandra, "Brandon came to my office. He informed me that he had discovered his wife's infidelity and wished to revise his will accordingly. He had hired a private investigator who documented extensive evidence of Mrs. Thompson's ongoing relationship with Mr. Daniel James, who I note is present today." Cassandra's face contorted with rage and shock. "You can't prove anything. Those could be doctored photos. This is a setup." Mr. Harrington remained unmoved. "The evidence is quite comprehensive, Mrs. Thompson. Phone records, hotel receipts, photographs, and video surveillance spanning 6 months. Brandon was very thorough." He turned to the next page of the will. "In the event the morality clause is triggered, the estate distribution shall be as follows. The family residence and a trust fund of $2 million shall be held for the benefit of my children, Amy, Elizabeth Thompson, and Tyler Richard Thompson, to be administered by my mother, Pearl Ann Thompson, who shall have lifetime residency rights to the family home as guardian of my children." My heart nearly stopped. Brandon had known. He had protected me, protected his children. Mr. Harrington continued. "My business interests shall be divided equally between my business partner, Jack Peterson, and a trust for my children. My wife, Cassandra Marie Thompson, shall receive a monthly stipend of $3,000 for a period of 5 years contingent upon her allowing my mother full access to my children. Should she contest this will or attempt to prevent my mother from seeing my children, this stipend shall be reduced to the minimum required by law." Cassandra exploded from her chair. "This is outrageous. I'll fight this. No judge will uphold this outdated sexist morality clause." Mr. Harrington's expression remained calm but firm. "Mrs. Thompson morality clauses have been consistently upheld in this state when backed by clear evidence, which we have. Additionally, Brandon recorded a video statement explaining his reasons for the clause, which would be very compelling to any judge." He gestured to a folder. "The video details how he discovered your affair, how long it had been going on, and his concerns about your fitness as the sole guardian of his children given your pattern of deception. Daniel James, looking increasingly uncomfortable, stood up. Cassandra, maybe we should discuss this with your lawyer before saying anything else. But Cassandra was beyond reason. She pointed at me, her face twisted with hatred. You knew about this, didn't you? You and Brandon conspired against me? I shook my head, still trying to process everything I was hearing. I had no idea, Cassandra. Brandon never told me. Jack spoke up for the first time since the reading began. Brandon wanted to protect his mother and his children. He saw what was happening and took steps to ensure they would be cared for if anything happened to him. That's all. Cassandra grabbed her purse and headed for the door, Daniel following behind her. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll see all of you in court. The door slammed behind her, leaving a ringing silence in the room. I sat motionless, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't begin to sort through. Relief, vindication, and fresh grief for my son who had been carrying such a terrible burden alone. Mr. Harrington closed his portfolio. Mrs. Thompson Pearl. He corrected himself gently. We have much to discuss about your role as trustee and guardian, but perhaps you'd like some time to process what you've learned today. I nodded, unable to find words. Jack placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. I'll make sure she gets home safely, he told Mr. Harrington. We can come back tomorrow to go over the details. As we left the conference room, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Brandon had known about Cassandra's betrayal. He had taken steps to protect me and his children, and now in his absence I would have to be strong enough to honor his final wishes and fight for the family he had left behind. The days following the will reading were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. Mr. Harrington expedited the legal paperwork to establish me as the children's guardian and trustee of their inheritance. Jack was invaluable during this process, explaining complex legal terms and standing beside me at every meeting. Armed with court orders and accompanied by a police officer, I returned to what was now legally my home. Cassandra answered the door, her expression venomous when she saw me. You can't be serious, she spat. You think you're moving back in? I handed her the court order. The house belongs to the Children's Trust now, Cassandra. I'm their legal guardian and trustee. According to Brandon's will, I have lifetime residency rights. She snatched the document, scanning it quickly. This is temporary. My lawyers will overturn this ridiculous will. You're welcome to try, I said, finding a strength in my voice I hadn't felt in weeks. But Mr. Harrington seems confident, and I trust Brandon's judgment. He knew what he was doing. The police officer stepped forward. Ma'am, the court order is clear. Mrs. Thompson has the right to enter and reside in this home. Cassandra's face flushed with anger. Fine. Come in. But this isn't over. I walked past her into the foyer, memories washing over me. The house smelled the same, looked the same, yet everything was different. Brandon's absence was palpable in every room. Where are the children? I asked, noticing the unnatural quiet. At a play date, Cassandra replied curtly. She pointed to a stack of boxes in the living room. I've already packed your things. I assumed you'd want them. I ignored the boxes. I'll be staying in my old room, Cassandra. We need to discuss how we're going to make this work for Amy and Tyler's sake. She laughed bitterly. Make this work? You think we're going to play happy family after what you've done? What I've done, Cassandra. I didn't know about Brandon's will. I didn't know about your affair. All I want is what's best for my grandchildren. What's best for them is not being raised by a vindictive old woman who stole their home. I took a deep breath, refusing to be baited. I didn't steal anything. This house belongs to Amy and Tyler, now held in trust until they're adults. I'm here to take care of them and make sure they're provided for just as Brandon wanted. Brandon is dead, she said coldly, and I'm still their mother. Yes, you are, I acknowledged, and I have no intention of trying to change that. But I am their grandmother, and I have rights too, rights that Brandon specifically protected in his will. Over the next few weeks, an uneasy truce developed in the house. Cassandra and I established separate spaces and routines, interacting only when necessary for the children's sake. She continued to sleep in the master bedroom while I returned to my old room. The kitchen became neutral territory, though we rarely ate meals together. The children were initially confused by the arrangement, but delighted to have their grandmother back. Amy especially had missed me terribly, trailing behind me around the house as if afraid I might disappear again. Tyler was more reserved at first, having been told by Cassandra that I had chosen to leave because I didn't want to live with them anymore. It took time to rebuild his trust. Cassandra's threats of legal action materialized in the form of a team of expensive lawyers who filed motions contesting the will. Mr. Harrington calmly countered each one, presenting the extensive evidence Brandon had gathered. The judge consistently ruled in our favor, particularly after viewing the video Brandon had recorded explaining his decisions. In the video, which I watched with a breaking heart, Brandon appeared tired but resolute. He detailed how he had discovered text messages between Cassandra and Daniel, how he had hired a private investigator to confirm his suspicions and his fears about what would happen to his mother and children if anything happened to him. "I still love Cassandra," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "but I can't trust her to do right by my mother, or even by our children if I'm not here. This is the only way I can protect them." After 3 months of failed legal challenges and mounting attorney fees, Cassandra finally accepted defeat. One evening, she called me into the living room where she sat surrounded by packed suitcases. "I'm moving out," she announced without preamble. "I'm going to live with Daniel. He's found a place in the city." I was surprised, but relieved. The tension in the house had been exhausting for everyone, especially the children. "What about Amy and Tyler?" "I'm not abandoning my children," she said defensively. "I'll have them on weekends and for dinner twice a week. It's all been worked out with the lawyers." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Despite everything Cassandra had done, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of sympathy for her. She was losing her home, her full-time role as mother, and the financial security she had clearly valued so highly. "You won," she said bitterly. "Brandon got his revenge from beyond the grave, and you get to play mother again with my children. This isn't about winning or losing Cassandra. It's about fulfilling Brandon's wishes and doing what's best for Amy and Tyler. They need stability and love right now. They need both of us in whatever capacity we can provide that." She looked away, but not before I caught a glimpse of something that might have been regret in her eyes. "I did love Brandon, you know, in my own way." "I believe you," I said, surprised to find I actually did. People were complex relationships, even more so. Perhaps Cassandra had loved Brandon while still betraying him. Perhaps she had convinced herself that her affair didn't negate her feelings for her husband. The following day, Cassandra moved out. The children cried, not fully understanding why their mother was leaving. I assured them they would still see her regularly, that both their parents loved them, and that sometimes grown-ups needed different living arrangements to be happy. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing both my own wounds and those of my grandchildren. We established new routines, finding comfort in simple pleasures like baking cookies, weekend trips to the park, and bedtime stories. I hung photos of Brandon throughout the house, ensuring the children would always remember their father's face and the love he had for them. I found Brandon's journal in his office desk, a discovery that brought both pain and insight. The entries detailed his discovery of Cassandra's affair, his struggle to decide what to do, his concerns about confronting her, and ultimately his decision to protect his family through legal means rather than a messy divorce. "Mom has already lost Dad," he wrote. "I can't bear the thought of her losing her home and access to the kids too if something happens to me. Cassandra would cut her out completely out of spite." Grief counseling helped all of us process our loss. The children's therapist suggested ways to keep Brandon's memory alive through traditions and rituals. We planted a tree in the backyard on his birthday. We made a memory box where the children could place drawings or notes to their dad whenever they missed him particularly badly. Slowly, we learned to live with the absence to find joy despite the pain. The legal battles with Cassandra eventually concluded with a settlement. She received a slightly larger monthly stipend in exchange for dropping all remaining claims against the estate. Our co-parenting relationship remained strained but functional. For the sake of the children, we maintained civil interactions at school events and during exchanges for visitation. With Jack's help, I learned to manage the children's trust and Brandon's business interests. I discovered I had a better head for finances than I'd ever realized. We established a foundation in Brandon's name to support single parents facing housing insecurity, turning our family's tragedy into something positive for others. I also renovated parts of the house, changing the decor enough to create a fresh start without erasing the home's history. The master bedroom became a playroom for the children. Cassandra's home office transformed into a comfortable reading nook. These changes helped exorcise some of the painful memories while preserving the warmth and character Brandon had loved about the house. Jack became a regular presence in our lives, stopping by for dinner or taking the kids for ice cream on Sundays. His friendship was a lifeline during the darkest days, his stories about Brandon helping the children connect with the father they were too young to fully remember. Over time, our relationship evolved from mutual grief into something deeper, more meaningful. We moved slowly, both aware of the complex emotions involved, but a year after Brandon's death, Jack asked if he could take me to dinner, not as Brandon's mother or business partner, but as Pearl. Our first holiday season without Brandon was bittersweet. We honored family traditions while creating new ones. Amy insisted on making Brandon's favorite Christmas cookies. Tyler hung his father's stocking alongside our own. We cried, we laughed, we remembered. Most importantly, we moved forward together. 1 year after Brandon's death, I stood in the backyard next to the memorial tree we had planted, now growing strong and tall. The children were playing on the swing set, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Jack stood beside me, his hand warm in mine. "Brandon would be proud," he said softly, "of all of you, of how you've handled everything." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. I still can't believe he knew, that he was carrying that burden alone. "He wasn't alone," Jack assured me. "He talked to me about it. He was heartbroken but determined to protect you and the kids. That's the kind of man he was." "The best kind," I agreed. Looking at my grandchildren playing secure in their home and their future, I felt a profound gratitude for Brandon's foresight and love. He had given me not just financial security, but a purpose, a second chance at creating a loving family environment for his children. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been days when grief threatened to overwhelm me, when the legal battle seemed insurmountable, when the tension with Cassandra made me question whether any of this was worth fighting for. But standing there watching Amy teach Tyler how to pump his legs on the swing, I knew without doubt that it had been worth every moment. Sometimes the greatest act of love is protecting those you care about even after you're gone. Brandon had understood that, had made difficult decisions from a place of love rather than vengeance. In doing so, he taught me one final lesson about courage and foresight. Life can change in an instant. A phone call, an accident, a revelation at a will reading. We can't control these moments, but we can control how we respond to them, how we rebuild from the broken pieces. If you're watching this and facing your own unexpected chapter, I hope you find the strength to stand your ground and fight for what matters. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after tragedy struck? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone.